Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the University of California here at Los Angeles. Welcome to the Anderson School of Management. You see the flags on your left. Those flags represent the countries from which all our students in the MBA program originate. So you can see we have a very international program. There's hope for all of us in this world. And I want to say on behalf of the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate, the Urban Land Institute, and our sponsor, the Planning Report, I want to welcome you to a forum this morning. The forum is titled, Never Let a Good Crisis Go to Waste. And we are going to talk about the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative. We're going to talk about a competing initiative put forth by organized labor. And we're going to talk about a planning process here in the city of Los Angeles, which is controversial to say the least. I'm delighted to see many friends and colleagues and students here in the room. I want to give a shout out to the founder of the Ziman Center, Mr. Richard Ziman, who's here this morning. It's surely the case, so we wouldn't be here without Dick. And we also wouldn't be here today without the dedicated work of our Ziman Center Executive Director, Tim Kawahara. Tim, are you around here somewhere? Tim, Jack Skelly, who's with us, Julie Lindner, David Abel, and many others. Thank you all. We really appreciate it. We're here because we all have a concern, and the concern is born in part in the success of our efforts to create a dynamic economic environment and dynamic economic growth here in LA. As we all know, we live in the second largest metro area in the country, a metro area that's characterized by broad and sophisticated and modern economic base, economic area that includes the largest trade district in the country. And it goes without saying that you can't have a burgeoning economy without real estate development. And in fact, this burgeoning economy provides ample opportunity as well as necessity for real estate development. I think it's also the case, as we all know, that our city planning, permitting, and approving process is under siege. It's the topic of criticism from many sides. And yet, there aren't too many of us in the audience here, at least people of my age, who remember when LA was otherwise, who remember when the downtown of LA was a ghost town, who remember when Hollywood was severely economically depressed, who would trade the problems of today for the problems of yesterday, and indeed the problems of successful economic development. So amongst yourselves and amongst the audience, the advocates, the stakeholders, the citizen groups here, and on our panel, as I'll introduce momentarily, there are a myriad of different perspectives about planning, about development. We have the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative itself. Jill Stewart is here. We're going to talk about that. We have an alternative initiative, as I said, proposed by organized labor. Rusty Hicks is here. We're going to talk about that. And Mayor Garcetti has just jumped into the act, and he's talked about plans to modernize and streamline and enlarge the planning department and the planning process and all the rest. We have Gail Goldberg and others who are here who are going to talk about all of that. So our objective this morning is really straight up. We want to shed some light on these various perspectives and initiatives. And I would humbly suggest to you as a representative of UCLA that UCLA is very aptly suited to the task. We are a leading global public university. We are a public university in the trust of the people of California. We are a resource of the people of California. We are the University of California at Los Angeles. And here in this university is the Ziman Center as an educational research, a policy institute. And we at the Ziman Center focus precisely on the topics of today's forum, on real estate development, on land use, on urban economics and policy. And at the center, we seek to address significant issues that pertain, and our topic today is no exception in the sense that we cut to critical issues at the very core, our efforts to preserve quality of life, as we're going to talk about, I believe, our efforts to enhance economic competition, similarly critical, and our efforts to assure the growth and development of our beloved city. If any of you have seen the seal of the University of California, it contains 4 words. And the 4 words come from the first chapter of Genesis, and the 4 words are, "Let there be light." And that is our mission here at the University of California, and it is our mission here this morning. We are going to shine the light. And we're going to shine the light on complicated issues. We're going to nuance these issues, and we're going to hope to leave with some common ground, with some improved insights, and of course, a way forward that we all wish, which is a way forward in the best interests of the city of LA. My first job this morning is to introduce my friend John Zasloff. And John, if you could please hop up to the podium. John is a professor of law here at UCLA. He teaches a myriad of topics that are quite germane: land use, environmental law, urban planning law, and all the rest. He's very, very well educated. Not only does he have a degree in law, but he has a PhD from Harvard and a master's degree from Cambridge. And John's going to start us out with some legal backdrop on the initiatives.
My brief this morning is basically to get you up to speed as quickly as possible on what's actually in these 2 proposed initiatives against the backdrop of what's happening in Los Angeles, so then you'll be experts on it and you can ask everybody else what's happening. Okay. The most important thing is about them is they both are involving changing the general plan. People in Los Angeles would be within their rights not to know much about what a general plan is. I think several of the speakers today will suggest that although we have one formally, we don't have one really. According to state law, every city, every county, and even every city and county, if you're from San Francisco, has to have a general plan that's a constitution for development, and everything that you do in terms of land use has to fit into the general plan. I'm always wary of what I say when I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, because the first rule of PowerPoint presentations is understand that your audience is literate. That means they can read what's on the PowerPoint presentation, so there's no point in me simply repeating it. But the point is that the general plan sits at the apex of any land use regulation or any land use rule in a city. Everything has to be consistent with it, and it also has to be internally consistent with it. The left hand theoretically has to know what the right hand is doing. But the problem is that unlike a regular constitution, a general plan is very easy to amend, or at least there's no particular requirement making it more difficult to amend. In this sense, it's very much like a regular statute or a regular ordinance. It's not entrenched like a constitutional provision is, and so developers can say, what have I got to lose? And in this, for most general plans, with the exception of the housing element, which has to be redone every 8 years in Southern California, there is no requirement for the general plan to be redone. So what we've got is a situation where we've got a general plan, but you don't have to keep updating it. And in Los Angeles, we do not have a very good history of general plans. Up until the early 1980s, we had a general plan and routinely ignored it, which was legally permissible until the late 70s, but was not good planning practice at all. And there was a series of litigation brought about that one. We haven't updated it in 20 years. And that's a mighty long time, but I'm here to tell you that many of the times when the city does try to do more things about the general plan, it's sued for it. There was a major effort to update the community plans, which is the land use element of the general plan. The city did it. They updated the community plan for Hollywood and were promptly sued for it, and it was overturned in Superior Court. So the interaction between litigation and planning is going to be a theme that comes up all the time. In fact, even when the city promulgated the general plan framework in 1996, it really didn't go into effect in a serious way for another decade because it was tied up with lawsuits. All of these were lawsuits basically from homeowners associations. So one of the response to this is the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative, which is one of the major reasons why we're here. What it does is it essentially, and I'm oversimplifying and we'll get into the details when we go further, is that it freezes any projects that need to increase density and need a general plan amendment to do it. If the general plan has a lower density framework at one point, and if a developer wants to build a bigger project, they not only are going to need to upzone, but they're going to need to have a general plan amendment, and the Neighborhood Integrity Initiative would stop that for 2 years. It's not delirious. The projects that don't require a general plan amendment are unaffected. So if you hear that what the Community Integrity Initiative will do will freeze construction, that is not true, just as a matter of law. And there are certain exceptions in it if you've got a 100% affordable project, if you have to fix buildings for seismic reasons, or if there are vested rights, if there are constitutional rights as part of this. The other thing that it does is that it mandates that the city updates the general plan. Again, with the exception of the housing element, which is state required to be updated, the city has not updated the general plan framework in 20 years, and it says that all of the elements have to be updated in 5 years. Is that much too fast? There are restrictions also on parking requirements. I see my colleague Don Shoup here. Whenever I mention parking requirements, I see the steam coming out of Don's head. So if somebody does have some water, please give it to him. But in fact, it restricts the times and the places where you can actually reduce the parking requirements for a developer, never more than 1/3 in the context of a planning, never more than 1/3 in the context of a general plan amendment, and everybody can sue. That's actually, I was being flip about this. Let's go crazy. I was being flip about this. This is also true of the Build Better LA. Just about anybody will have the standing to sue if they are aggrieved on all of this. So it's great for my business. In fact, large parts of the charter are great for my business, and we thank you for all of this. Another thing that the plan bans is so-called spot zoning, which is a technical matter, actually already is banned, although it's not enforced very much for the courts. Spot zoning is essentially a phenomenon by which, under a planning process, which is supposed to be broad and general and forward-thinking, you actually redo a lot of your zones and your general plan designations for one particular applicant. And one of the things that it says is that you're not allowed to redo this. This is permanent change of the charter. You're not allowed to do these kinds of smaller areas or any geographic area that does not have a significant social, economic, or physical identity. Cue the postmodernists, who has an identity anyway. But in any event, it specifies what it means to actually have an identity for planning purposes. You can't do just a general plan amendment for a specific thing. That is a permanent change to the charter, and that is also a mighty long time. The response, if one can call it a response, has been from affordable housing advocates and labor, and Rusty will talk more about this, is the so-called Build Better LA initiative, which could be on the ballot, which essentially tries to give incentives for certain kinds of affordable projects, and as is to be expected from the county Fed, also allows for prevailing wage. There are certain kinds, doesn't actually allow for prevailing wage, it mandates it. There are certain kinds of projects that it appears to favor, such as bigger projects in certain areas of the city. We should grow where we want to be growing, centers and regional centers, affordable housing projects, etc. Assistance for people who are permanent residents of Los Angeles. Don't hire people from Orange County. They should go back behind the orange curtain. And for transitional workers who are people coming out of homelessness or other sorts of situations, and in apprenticeship programs, there is a question as to whether all of these things, at least in the initiative itself, whether any of these things are actually really incentivized. Because all of the initiative says is that there's nothing here that should prevent them. Which is great, but that doesn't necessarily incentivize them. A couple of other things, general plan updates. You don't have to be rich, you don't have to watch Dynasty to have an attitude, but instead what it does is it says that if you're going to do a general plan amendment, there has to be an assessment about what are the ways in which you might be losing affordable housing units, and you cannot undermine the capacity or preservation of affordable housing, and also begins a process of inventorying both affordable units and the covenants, the legal contracts that run with it. Recently, the city of Los Angeles, under the direction of my good friend Ken Bernstein, has done an inventory of historic properties. This looks a little bit like doing a similar kinds of inventory of affordable properties. Here is the poverty bringing you down. This is really where the teeth of the Build Better initiative come in. What it says is that if you're going to have a general plan amendment, which it allows, remember the CII does not allow these things unless you replan. If you are going to have a general plan amendment that increases density or floor area ratio, then you have to have an inclusionary provision. You have to include affordable housing. So that's your standard inclusionary zoning ordinance in that way. That should be familiar to most people in this audience. If you're a developer and you don't want to put them in that building, you can put them off-site. But the farther that you go away from your original project, the more affordable units you're going to have to put in. So there is sort of an incentive for greater economic integration. Or if you really don't want to build those units, you can pay an in-lieu fee, but the in-lieu fee is going to be more expensive than the cost of building the unit of itself. At least that's the theory. And of course, prevailing wage, because you have to, right? Transit-oriented affordable housing program that is mentioned in the initiative. It is not particularly clear what it is. They basically tell the planning department, give us some incentives for transit-oriented affordable housing. That would be good. There are probably going to be density bonuses in excess of the state law. The Government Code Section 65915 allows for density bonuses, in fact mandates them. This would theoretically increase those density bonuses. Problem, just some background on the numbers, is the most recent housing element said we're going to be short on units of all kinds, both affordable and non-affordable units. We have a RHNA number, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment number, which it concedes that we are going to need 10,250 units a year, and we've been building about 6,000 a year. So we're already falling behind. It's not clear how either of these initiatives helps that. Both on affordable and non-affordable, we're supposed to have 82,002 units for our Regional Housing Needs Assessment number, but we're going to, according to the housing element, which we have to promulgate, we're going to be short by 2021 by more than 22,000 units. And housing elements are not the sorts of documents that tend to overestimate housing need. They are very conservative documents that usually say we're going to be doing really, really well. So if the housing element is conceding that we're going to be 22,000 units short, that can be a huge problem, and that is also why David talks about in this notion, how can we let a crisis go? Let's not let a crisis go to waste. What can we do about the process that's going to make it easier for those units to get built? Why do we scream at each other? This is what it sounds like when doves cry. Look, if that's why it's purple, guys. Look, we've often complained about the lack of planning in Los Angeles. Why is that? I hear all the time, well, it's because we have no planning culture. That, to me, is not an answer. That just restates the problem. Why is it? Is it really more of a fundamental political problem? The reason why we can't have a synoptic, rational planning process is because, dirty little secret, people disagree. They have different views about what the city is supposed to look like, and we haven't been able to achieve consensus. You say you want a leader, but you can't seem to make up your mind. That's from Purple Rain. Neither of these initiatives appear to address the problems set forth in the housing element. So how are we going to close this gap no matter what happens with these initiatives? One passes, the other passes. Now, finally, people's views are actually focused on this problem and how we're going to fix it. I'm done.